Good evening, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. I'd like to welcome you all here to the Mansion House, and thank you all as well for turning up on this Wednesday evening. We're delighted to see so many people showing up for our talk series. And of course, we're all here this evening to hear Professor Joseph Brady, who is modestly sitting in fact, behind us. And Joseph is going to be talking about his book, Dublin Mapping the City. And as you'll have noticed, the book, Dublin Mapping the City, is available to purchase this evening. So you'll be totally forgiven to get up during Joe's talk and get a copy of the book. And we may or may not check your bags before you leave to make sure that you actually have purchased the book. So without doing too much more hard selling, this is the second talk in our series. And this is a new series that we in the Heritage Office have organised this year. The series is part funded by the Heritage Council's County Heritage Plan grant scheme, and as such, it is an action of the Dublin City Strategic Heritage Plan. The series aims to showcase important new books, new research, new ideas and projects happening in the city that we think are really important, and we would like to provide an opportunity for the wider public to know about them. Like all talk series, it takes a village to really organise these things, and so I've just a few people to thank. First of all, Abigail O'Reilly, who's Graduate Heritage Officer working with me in the Heritage Office, and without Abigail doing all of the hard work behind the scenes, this series would not be happening at all. I'd also like to thank Richie and all the staff here in the Mansion House for continuing to support the series by providing us this wonderful space. And I'd also like to welcome Cormac Leonard, who is standing beside me, who is our Irish Sign Language interpreter, who will be with us until May. The next talk in the series is going to be Graham Hickey, the CEO of Dublin Civic Trust, who on the 20th of May will be talking about their major conservation project at 18 Ormond Quay. The Civic Trust have for years been engaged in the conservation of buildings that might otherwise have been demolished, and their practice of conservation is there's a huge element of education, and so they are continuously showcasing new techniques and best practice, not only through the work that they do, but through all of the programming and courses that they organise around it. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Joe. Joe Brady is an urban geographer who has spent many years studying the growth and development of Dublin, much of which is published in the book series The Making of the City, published by Four Courts Press. Maps have always been an important resource in this research, and the current lecture is based on a recent book, Dublin Mapping the City, written with Paul Ferguson and published by Berlin. So I would like to, if you could all welcome Joe to the podium. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming. It's a pleasure to be here. I want to thank Charles for the invitation and to endorse his thanks to Abby and to Cormac, because these were, as he indicated, essential folks in making this work. Now, maps are something that you all have. You've got a mobile phone, you've got a map, and you probably have made more use of maps in past few years than you've ever did before. And yet, I'm going to say to you that they're much more versatile documents than you might think. They can be works of art in their own right, the product of very fine engraving, fine colouring. They are repositories of huge amounts of information. So they summarise social, economic, demographic data, and they do it in a spatially referenced way. So they not only can summarise all of these data, but they show you where it is relative to something else. And they can be political documents. Let me just show you. This is a map from 1606. It's by a German guy called Matthias Quad. Now, it's not particularly interesting in itself, in the sense that if you are a map person, you will recognise the map because it's Abraham Ortelius's map of Ireland from 1576. Quad stole it. That's fine, they do lots of that. But the important thing is you'll notice that up in the right-hand corner there is a political statement. It's one of the first political statements you'll see. It's an engraving of Her Gracious Majesty Queen Elizabeth, and it says that she is Queen of England, France, Hibernia, and lots of other places. They are political statements. They're important historical ones. If you want a single map of Dublin that I can say, look, this is the map of Dublin, this is what you'll see. This is John Speed's map of Dublin. It's the first surviving map of the city. Surviving because it's based on another one. He stole it. He tells us he stole it. He says, I have often ploughed another man's field with no shame whatsoever. But Speed is well known. Speed, in mapping terms, Speed is the one that we always go to because it's the only one that we've got. And so if there's a single map of Ireland that is known more than any, or a single map of Dublin that's known more than anything else, it is John Speed. And it's accidental. Speed had space. As you can see, his main focus was the province of Leinster. He had space. And so the way he fills space in his maps and all of the other ones is to put in a map of the city. We'd filled in the space and sure wasn't that grand. And now we use it for everything. We to the point that if you take it that the city is at least 1,000 years old, after all, we celebrated its millennium in 1988, even though it was older than that, and apologies to the archaeologists and the audience. It is older than that, but nonetheless, we're still using this. We use this to go look backwards, and we use it to look forwards. So I'm not going to be talking about the well-known maps of the city. I'm going to be spending some time talking about the lesser-known maps, and it's an eclectic collection. You'll be wondering what draws them all together. Well, just my mind, and that's, as they say, that could be interesting. So, the first map, it's all in this. This is I've been working with maps for all of my life pretty well, and they have been secondary to the text. Maps have been used to illustrate the text. So when Paul and I got the opportunity to focus on maps themselves and let maps tell their story, it's something we jumped at. And that's really what the book is about. The book is about the story of Dublin as told through a selection of maps, and a selection of well-known ones, but a selection of ones which I hope you don't know, which you haven't seen. The first one is about the funeral of Daniel O'Connell. Now, Daniel O'Connell died in 1847. He was on his way to Rome. He got as far as Genoa and he died. And getting him home was a big deal. It was one of those very interesting moments where PR and the whole business of managing an occasion really came to the fore. I mean, we tend perhaps to think that the whole business of PR and stage managing public occasions is something from our era. But it wasn't. This was a wonderful opportunity to take the funeral of a hero, to turn it into a public event without annoying the British authorities too much. This was skillfully done. We have a very detailed account of it from the Illustrated London News, who produced a large supplement with engravings which tell us how it went on. But the map I'm talking about is an ephemeral piece. It's a large piece of very flimsy paper, which we've only ever seen one copy. We don't really know how many of them were printed. We know it was printed by a guy called O'Shaughnessy, and he printed it firstly as a souvenir of the funeral, and also as a guide to where you should go and stand for the funeral, because the funeral was stage managed. Now, how the stage managing was done was that Daniel O'Connell's body was brought by steamer to Kingstown. It didn't dock in Kingstown, But at Kingstown, the family went on board and the family paid their respects to the body. Then the steamer made its way up to George's Dock, and at that point it became a public event. Every clergyman in the country apparently went on board. So it's one of the great things about the steamer that it didn't tip over. There were hundreds of them apparently, and they took possession of the body. And the body was drawn. If I can go back, actually, the body was drawn. You can see there the hearse, the hearse with the horses, drawn down to the Pro-Cathedral, where you see a particular catafalque was built for it. It was laid out, and there was going to be a huge public funeral. So you needed a map. And this is what O'Shaughnessy printed. He printed this large folio map on pretty cheap paper, using lithography. It was pretty advanced at the time. And it was designed to show you, firstly, where you should go, depending on your status and depending on where you came in the hierarchy of Dublin. So on the map, we have outlined, I'm just going to jump away from the microphone for a minute just to show you. Here is the Pro-Cathedral. Here is the hearse. And here are the various streets around the Pro-Cathedral. Now, in those streets, we are told who's going to go where. So around here in Mecklenburgh Street, that's where the Lord Mayor is going to be, the members of the corporation, they're going to be in their carriages. Go further up to the next one, that's where the Lord Mayors and the mayors of the other towns and cities in the country are going to be in their carriages. Go further up, you've got lesser beings as well. It must have been interesting for them actually, because the area, even in the 1840s, was beginning to develop a reputation for other activities which normally took place at night. Then you had the other parts. So this was not going to be a simple procession, by the way. This was not going to be a simple funeral. They weren't going simply to Glasnevin Cemetery. They were going on a grand tour around the city. And the map then told you that if you weren't in this first order of people, then maybe you would assemble outside Trinity College. And in Nassau Street, you would have the tailors, the tobacconists, the bootmakers, the papermakers. Outside Trinity, you had the triumphal car, which was a memento of the fact that O'Connell had been imprisoned for sedition, had got out and had been brought around the city in this triumphal car. You had then the confraternities of Christian doctrine. You had the pupils of the Christian Brothers schools, and so on. And the whole thing was set out with great military precision. And here we have the Illustrated London News with their image of the crowds. And of course, you were in possession of your map. And excuse me, no, I have to be here, this is where And it went all the way around the city. Eventually, stage managed beautifully, it got back as far as the North Circular Road. The carriages all peeled off. That left the people on foot. They lined up on either side of the road. Eventually the hearse passed by, and only the inner circle got themselves into Glasnevin Cemetery for the burial. There was no danger as well too, because if I can draw your eye to the symbol at the top of Sackville Street, this is a symbol of horses. It is a gentleman on horseback. And this is where the gentlemen on horseback who were interested in going would assemble. And why have them there? Because up around Rutland Square are the hoi polloi, the ordinary citizens of Dublin. So just in case anybody was going to jump the procession and get into the front of it. The gentlemen on horseback were there, not as a threatening element at all, just to make sure that you knew where things were. How did this map survive? This map was found in a basement in Trinity College where a cat was sleeping on it. And only for that, who knows whether it would have got to us. Now, one of the things about maps is that they're great. As I say, they're great in giving you a sense of the spatial arrangements between the various elements of data. You can show your data and you can show them in their arrangements. But you can't show them in 3D. But this is what a guy called Heffernan tried to do. We don't know much about Daniel Edward Heffernan. He was a civil engineer, which is important, you'll see. He was a surveyor. For a while he lived in Rathmines, and he came to the view that there was money to be made in producing tourist guides. And he produced a tourist guide for the developing market in the Lakes of Killarney, and there was also a developing market in Wicklow. But he also produced this map, Dublin in 1861, and it's what he called an isometrical view of the city. So what he did was he took the important buildings of the city in their location and he drew them in 3D. So you get an unparalleled, an unprecedented view of the design and layout of buildings that you normally wouldn't. Over here on the north side, you have, in and around Grangegorman, you have a view of the new railway terminus, the Broadstone station. You have a view of the Richmond Penitentiary, the female penitentiary. You have a view of the Richmond Lunatic Asylum, the North Dublin Union Workhouse, the Hardwick Fever Hospital, and sundry other buildings, all drawn in incredible detail. And one of the interesting things about it is you get at the outlines of the prison. One of the other maps that we talk about, I won't be talking about tonight, is the first 25-inch sheet which the Ordnance Survey produced in Dublin, and it was for Dublin Castle. And it shows you the layout of Dublin Castle in incredible detail. It shows you all the individual rooms, the corridors, and so on. When the authorities saw this, nobody had noticed that they were producing this map in hundreds. When they saw this, they said, well, no other map ever showed anything other than the outline of Dublin Castle, because they realised the security implications of this. The same is true of the other maps. You see Trinity College in all its glory. You see St. Stephen's Green with the statue of George sitting happily there. You see the building of the Dublin Society. And this is what makes this map different, and this makes this map interesting, is that you not only get a map of the city, but you get these pictures of these buildings which don't otherwise get. You also get, he didn't waste any space, you also get these vignettes of the areas around the city. Now, most of them you'll know, but many of them you wouldn't. And this one in particular shows you the view going into the port along the south wall. And you can see the south wall as it was in 1861. And you can see Pigeon's Hotel, Mr. Pigeon's Hotel, the Pigeon House. And that again adds to the map. We don't know how many he sold, but he was conscious of the need for advertising, and he prepared a prospectus, which he set out. In the prospectus, he set out the various statements of praise of the map from various people, and there was a list of subscribers. Now, as you know, publishing a list of subscribers is a kind of gentle form of advertising and intimidation, in that if you're not there, it indicates that you're not with it, or that you were too mean to pony up the money. And the money was expensive. If you take it that a newspaper at the time would be costing you 5 pence in old money, A high-quality print of this costs 5 guineas, so £5, 5 shillings, and an ordinary one costs 3 guineas. But nonetheless, people were quite happy to buy this. Notable amongst the individuals were William Dargan, the railway entrepreneur. He bought 6 copies. And interestingly, Thomas Gresham, the proprietor of the Gresham Hotel, bought 10. His hotel features prominently on the map. The Shelbourne Hotel, who didn't buy any copies, is not mentioned at all. Purely, of course, by accident. Now, to change the tone, this is an entirely different map, an entirely different type of map. This is an incredibly detailed map of the instance of typhus fever in 1893. There were lots of things that would kill you in Dublin right through the 19th century and into the early part of the 20th century. There were lots of interesting diseases out there, and they were waiting for you. And there was particular concern in the 1890s about typhus fever. There had been a serious outbreak in 1891, and there had been a serious outbreak in 1893, and nobody was really sure what was causing it. Now, the Chief Medical Officer for Health, who was also the city analyst, and he was also the Professor of Public Health in the Royal College of Surgeons of Ireland, was Sir Charles Cameron. And Cameron was a force of nature. A big man, a dynamic figure in the city, who held that post until he dropped dead in 1920-21. He was casting around for this. And what this map shows, what this map gets, is it's not just a map of the instance of a disease in Dublin, and the detail is incredible. Each red dot shows you the location of a case. And there's a map for 1891, and this is the map for 1893. But it also gives you an insight into the state of medical knowledge at the time and the evolving state of medical knowledge. Because Cameron is sufficiently long in the post that we have his inaugural lectures from 1868, where he talks about the effects of bad air, malaria. He talks about how animal poisons rise up from putrefaction in the earth and get spread. And it is the ingestion of these putrid elements that causes disease. And this goes back, way back to Galen, and back before that to Vitruvius and all the rest of it. It is the notion of bad air. And in fact, it's the whole business of creating new housing for the working classes in Dublin is in fact a public health issue, because bad air is what causes this disease. And where do you get the worst air? You get in tenements. Now, Cameron is worried about typhus fever because, as I say, it thinks like it's on the increase, and it does kill, and it doesn't appear to differentiate much between the various social classes, which again is a matter of concern. Now, he knows, he at this point, he accepts that it is caused by a bacterium. Well, he sort of accepts that. He says, yes, I think we have to accept that typhus fever is caused by a bacterium. But he still believes it gets into the air. So it's spread by getting into the air. So how does it get into the air? It's from the soil. Dublin is a very polluted city. For generations, back to Speed, for 1,000 years, people have been using the soil as a way of dealing with sewerage. In other words, there's no sewerage at all. The groundwater is polluted. how come we haven't had typhus fever in such quantity before? Well, actually, it's because the bacterium doesn't like concentrated sewage. And what's happened is the new Vartry water has diluted that, because firstly, we're not putting the sewage into the ground anymore. And secondly, we've got now clean water leaking into the soil. So the bacterium is having a great time. So his theory is that you can explain the distribution of typhus fever in terms of the soil types. And the map shows you the green area are the gravels, the non-green area are the clay. How does it work? The gravels are looser, so air can percolate much more easily from the gravels than from the clay. So he says it's all about sorting out where the gravels are. And he explains the fact that the distinction between the two is not as great in 1893 as it was in 1891. Why? Because it was a very hot summer and the clays dried out. And as clay dries out, as you know, it cracks. And as it cracks, so the air comes up. So the map, as I say, is both an interesting map in itself, in showing you where the instances of the disease are, but also telling you an awful lot about the way in which knowledge is developing. I'll be brief on this. This is just a map which is worth looking at. It didn't get published, but it comes and it speaks to the attempts to increase the use of Irish, and the idea is to produce a map. This is produced by a guy called Cathal MacDowell, Cecil Grange MacDowell, who, as they say, was out in 1916. He also arranged the music for the Soldier Song and so on, but he was by day a corporation draftsman. And here we have his attempt to take what is a standard design for the map. Now, that map would have appeared in many atlases of the time. It's a standard design. He's taking it and he's replacing the elements, the English elements, with Irish names and Irish elements as well too. So he has restored, for example, the idea of the Irish mile. The Irish mile appears at the top left-hand corner together with the English mile. The Irish mile is still legal tender until 1926. And if we look through it, we can see this is a manuscript map. We're not sure of the date, but we reckon about 1924, because he talks there, if you can just read it on the right-hand side, it says, show the 100-foot road. Now, the 100-foot road is Griffith Avenue. That's its original name was going to be Griffith Road. It was always the 100-foot road. 1924, it becomes Griffith Avenue. We reckon that this is his plan for the next design of this map. But this is the only copy, never gets anywhere. The poor soul contracted TB when he was in Fronguk. He went off in 1923, I think, for a recuperation trip to Nice, and he fell out of the window of his hotel room, and that was the end of him. So here we have a unique map, a unique look at the world as it's going to change. Now, Dublin Bay features in an awful lot of the maps we have, because Dublin Bay has always been troublesome. It's recognised by travel writers, every traveller, from the time that people started producing travel guides to the city, Dublin Bay was praised. People talk about the beauty of the bay coming in the early morning on a sailing ship and so on, and hyperbole takes over and the Bay of Naples is mentioned and so on and so forth. From a seafarer, it was very different. It was dangerous. There are well over 200 wrecks in the bay because there are sandbanks in the bay. There is the North Bull, there is the South Bull, and then there is this wonderful thing called the Dublin Bar, which people think is a pub, but in fact it's not. It's a nasty sandbank which sits right across the channel, and that is what the two great walls, the South Wall and the wall out in Dollymount, were built to sort out. It squeezes the tide going out. And you know when you put your finger on a hose and you increase the pressure and the flow of the water, that's what happens. It scours the bank outwards. So that gives a nice shape to the bay, you see. And so the question is, what do we do with it? Now, one of the things that comes to Ireland in the early part of the 20th century is this concept called town planning. We are grappling with our housing crisis. When did we not have one? But we're doing this, and we're being told that the way to do this is in the context of a town plan. And Dublin is well connected. Dublin is not an isolated or backwater city. It is well connected with what's going on across Europe. And all of the great names in town planning come and visit. So we get Unwin, and particularly we get Geddes. And Geddes is a Scots sociologist, philosopher, amongst lots of different things, but he's also a great advocate of town planning. And in Dublin, around 1913, 1914, there's big discussion that they're going to have what Geddes has already had in Edinburgh with great success, an exhibition. The exhibition, a civic exhibition, is going to show what you can do with town planning, how you can organise a city so that it is planned and not just haphazardly happening. And they managed to persuade, or actually they probably were enthusiastic enough to do it. The Lord Lieutenant, Lord Aberdeen, puts up a prize of £500 for a town plan as part of an international competition. Now, £500 is one hell of a prize. You could buy a house for £500 in Dublin. No, not a big house, but you can buy a house in Dublin for £500. So they don't get that many entries, actually, surprisingly. But the guy who wins is a guy called Patrick Abercrombie. And Patrick Abercrombie now develops a lifelong association with the city. He becomes the go-to person for Dublin Corporation in terms of anything to do with planning until he dies. And in fact, then we continue on with his successor. Miles Wright was his successor in the University of Liverpool. So in fact, the University of Liverpool and Dublin have this very, very close association for the next 60 years. It takes a bit of time to publish the plan. There are kind of inconveniences along the way. There's the First World War, there's the 1916 Rising, there's the War of Independence, and there is the Civil War, none of which are conducive to producing a book. And it's 1922 when it comes out. Now, it's a plan, but it's also a competition entry, so he tells you take it with a bit of a grain of salt. At the same time, he produces these gorgeous maps, these beautifully drawn maps. And this one, plan number 1, sets out the priorities that have to be achieved as quickly as possible. And the bay comes to mind. So what's he going to do? He's going to fill it in. If you orient yourself, the line going there is the wall in Dollymount. Okay, so the thing says Outer Harbour, and that line going down is the line in Dollymount. And that's where the statue of Our Lady Star of the Sea is. Now, what are we going to do? We're going to fill it all in. So the view from Clontarf, sorry folks, gone. We're going to put industry in there, we're going to put housing in there, and we're going to do in the harbour. And of course we're going to have a very interesting new housing development up in Clontarf itself. And then in the south we're going to do something even more dramatic. We're going to take a line from the Half Moon Swimming Club, and we're going to take it all the way down to Blackrock. And we're going to fill in all of that, and we're going to put housing in there. And you can see the attraction, it's quite shallow. So you can do it, and you'll be able to get some very interesting house designs in there. Okay, it doesn't happen. Okay, but that doesn't go away. In the 1930s, there are 2 papers in the Jesuit journal Studies which have a proposal for Dublin Airport. The question is, where should Dublin Airport go? And the guy who writes this, who kind of diminishes his case a little bit, saying that he has no knowledge whatsoever of aeronautics, says that put it there, because it's going to be a seaplane airport, because seaplanes are the way to go. Okay, right, you say, fine, we don't do this. But Abercrombie again. Town planning is a slow burn in Dublin, despite the enthusiasm. In the 1934 Planning Act, local authorities are given the opportunity to become the planning authorities for their area, but they must make a plan. And they must make a plan with all convenient speed. This results in Dublin's first development plan in 1970. But in order to move this along, they bring in Patrick Abercrombie once more. And Patrick Abercrombie is asked to produce what's called the Sketch Development Plan. This is an agenda. It's a brief statement indicating what we should do, and it's full of interesting things. I mean, he develops a huge row with the Catholic Archdiocese of Dublin, for example, in terms of where the cathedral is going to go. Because he wants to put it down on Ormond Quay, and the Archdiocese has a vague plan of putting it on Merrion Square, but even though they have no real intention of building it there, they are damned if they're going to let any person, particularly somebody from Liverpool, come and tell them where to put it. So that's bits fun. But look, the bay is back in play. The left-hand side indicates Abercrombie once again is going for the bay. A little bit more, or a little bit less ambitious this time. Folks in Clontarf are getting half their view, and the Sandymount thing is only going down as far as Merrion Gates. But he does make the point that we can always go a bit further. And the same idea, parks, housing, and so on. Now, you might think that is a pipe dream and go away. But third map, right-hand side. Third map is from 1970-72. It's from Dublin Port and Docks. The Port and Docks Company needs to expand the port. In order to do this, they commissioned two town planning experts from Rotterdam to produce what they call a series of port studies. They're clever enough not to make proposals because they want to get to the next Christmas. So they put them out there as agenda items for discussion. And you can see they're filling in the port. We're filling in the bay once again. We're back actually to the way it was in 1922. And we're going to have Clontarf bye-bye and Sandymount bye-bye as well. In fact, we're going to have, don't forget the dates, in reflecting the new trend in Ballymun, we're going to have 17-storey statement apartment blocks there. Now, at the same time, Dublin Corporation is actively contemplating putting the eastern part of the motorway system through Sandymount as well. So there is, as you might imagine, a somewhat negative reaction from the local residents association, who at this stage have got themselves exercised because the motorway has been there for a while. But the planners, with all of the subtlety available to them, at a meeting where they were told that they weren't very keen on this loss of this lack of amenity, said, well, if it isn't that, it's going to be the motorway. So really, you can just pick between the two of them. And the folks said, well, no thanks. And it hasn't gone away, and it hasn't gone away yet. And it still hasn't gone away. And we will see again plans in the not too distant future to draw a wall, now in the interest of protecting us from the effects of sea level change, which is a serious problem. My final map today is an interesting one, I hope, for you, an interesting one to end on. If you had got a copy of Esquire from January 1960, you would have found in it an article called 9 Places to Hide. And this was an analysis of the 9 places on Earth where you might survive the inevitable nuclear war which was coming. And it was based on an analysis, firstly, of where people were largely likely to be attacked, and secondly, on the patterns of fallout. And one of the best places on the planet was Cork. And it is said, in fact, that this is the beginning of the migration of Dutch and German people to Cork. And they said that the industrial development of parts of West Cork by German firms actually was part of an assessment. Now, this would have been largely unknown in Dublin, because Esquire was on the banned publication list because it had a tendency to show ladies in a state of undress. So folks were unaware of this potential. But everybody got one of these. Bos Baha. Every household in the country got a copy of Bos Baha. It went through 2 editions, and you can see the little holes in the top. You were to put a string through it, and you were to hook it up in your refuge area, which was going to be under the stairs. And it is a manual for survival. The assumption is that we're not going to get hit by a nuclear weapon directly, although there are techniques for surviving. You do have to have a briefcase with you, and when the bomb goes off, you throw yourself on the ground and you put the briefcase behind your neck, and you'll be grand. But it's a manual for survival from radiation. It is a hopelessly optimistic document. It reckons that you've got maybe 14 days or so at most to deal with it, and then you come out and with your hose pipe you wash the radioactive dust off the roof and you wash the radioactive dust off the car, and you just don't do anything silly like eat tomatoes for a while. But the question is, was anybody bothered about us? And the answer is yes, they were. One of the outcomes from the fall of the Soviet Union was that a whole range of official documents became available. And there was a company in London called Collitz, which for years had been the main supplier of Eastern European literature. And one of the things that emerged were these maps. A series of maps of all of the major cities of Europe and the world, produced by the General Staff of the USSR. This one is dated 1980, although the information in it is probably more 1970s. It's a little bit out of date. Now there are 4 big sheets. I mean, the sheets are not, the individual sheets are not much smaller than the size of the screen. So there's great detail in them. And what do they do? Well, they show you all the streets. They name all the streets. Very good map, actually. There are some errors, but it's generally a good map. The streets are all named. Minor streets are named. You get directions. There's a very interesting summary. And then there are the interesting highlights, the things that are highlighted. And you find that certain buildings are colour-coded. And what kind of buildings are colour-coded? Well, you get civic institutions are coded red. You get military installations coloured green. You can see here, there is the Bank of Ireland. Trinity College, sorry. But they hadn't noticed the move of UCD to Belfield. So National Concert Hall, sorry, but UCD, okay. And over here we have the various, in green, the various military installations of Collins Barracks, and down there the Royal Hospital, you'll have noticed, and also the magazine fort. Now, I think the last time that there was weapons in the magazine fort was 1921, but whoever they paid, whoever they had in Dublin wasn't doing a great job. But nonetheless, somebody went to the trouble of colour coding the city of Dublin in terms of military and civil targets. So it is true that somebody was watching us. And at that point I'll finish and say I hope I've shown you that maps can be all kinds of things and give you all kinds of insights into the city. Thank you.